a fair warning for you. I am going to turn off the live stream when we have about 10 minutes left, because some of the stuff I'm going to mention is sensitive stuff. Not offensive or anything. It's just stuff that cannot go out over the live internet waves. But we will keep it on the CD. So I'll be fair that way, because I know some people are missing. But we will not stream it live. Daniel chapter 2. Turn with me to Daniel chapter 2. Tonight we are talking about what the world will look like in the last days. Why are we talking about that? Because everything that the Bible tells us, everything that the Holy Spirit is showing us, every pattern that we see in the Bible, every word of prophecy that you read in this Bible points to one thing. We are in and about to see the last days. Period. I understand that's what they told me all my life growing up. I understand that's what they told generations before me. I got that. But never before has the Bible and its prophecy been in more fulfillment and in more current application than it has ever been as it is right now. We are in the last days. And just anything aside, when somebody says, do you think this is the last days? I know 100% that it's your last days. And mine. We're in our last days. I promise you. Some of us, well, some of us may have 50 years or so left. I got that, but you're still in your last days, okay? But all that aside, and that was something I heard somebody else say that's pretty clever, but yeah, it's your last days. So you're with me in Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 2, we got a king, Babylonian king named Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Here's what I want people to understand something. When you read, especially in the Old Testament, about dreams, when anyone has a dream, the very first person God gave a dream to was a king who was a heathen king, to warn him so that he would not send his men to attack, I believe in this case it was Isaac's wife. So God uses dreams to tell people stuff. I personally believe that dreams were very, 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 very rare in the times of the Old Testament. When it says in Joel chapter 2 that in the last days he'll pour out his Spirit on all men, and it says that the young men will have visions and the old men will dream dreams, my personal belief is that in those days a dream was so extremely rare that if somebody had one, they stopped the nation. The king would put a stop to everything. We're not moving another muscle until we figure out what this dream means. So when Pharaoh had a dream in Egypt, he stopped all of Egypt. He stopped everybody. When Joseph had a dream and told people in Egypt that he had a dream, they stopped everything. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he tells his people, he says, we will not do anything until you interpret my dream. The problem is that he knew he had people that they could very well come up with anything. They're smart people. I know people that I could say, I had this dream, and they'll give me their interpretation. So he said, I'll tell you what, I want to know that it's real. The way I'm going to know it's real is I'm not going to tell you what I dreamed. So you're going to tell me what I dreamed, and then you're going to tell me what it means. And if you don't, I'm going to kill you. So these guys are begging, please let tell us what the dream is, then we'll interpret. So obviously these guys didn't have anything. Well, along comes Daniel, who is one of these Babylonian captives, or as one of these Hebrew captives in Babylon. And he is an interpreter of dreams, much like Joseph was in Egypt. And he came along, and we're going to start reading in chapter 2. Let's go to verse 14. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Daniel went in, desired of the king that he would give him time, and he would show the king the interpretation. Daniel went to his house, made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Who are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, by the way? Anybody know? That'd be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's a trivia question. Young people, that's a trivia question you need to know. What are the Hebrew names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? It's right there. Anyway, moving on, he told it to them that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and season. He removeth kings, setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. So at any given time, God is able to set up kings. He's able to remove kings. People ask me, who do you think is going to be the next president? I don't know, but I know that God is able to set up whatever leader he wants to be there. And a lot of times, and I don't know why I'm facing this way. I think there we go. I'm usually right here. I think it's because it's Sunday. I didn't bother to move it, so I'm sorry I wasn't just talking to you guys. But anyway, God can set up and remove leaders and kings as he wishes, as he wants. And people say, well, I don't know if I can vote for this. Now, don't get me wrong. Please, don't get me wrong. The church needs to have leadership in the government of the country. We need Christian leadership in our government. But too often times people are saying, and I got to be careful with this, but too often times people are saying, oh, I don't know about this and I don't know about that, and this candidate, they really don't mean, and I know that he or she, they're not, they say they're a Christian or this, that, and the other. Here's the deal. We're not voting for a pastor. Okay? You guys with me? You understand that God can put in who he needs to put in. And when Israel as a nation needed help, you know who God put in? Cyrus. A heathen, non-believing king. But he came in and saved the nation. That's all I'm going to say. Okay? God setteth up kings. And when you look in other places and you look in other nations, it's not being political. I'm not telling you who to go vote for whoever you want to vote for. Vote for Mickey Mouse. I don't care. We'll write it in. But you've got to understand, God sets up kings. How does God control what is happening on this planet? He uses leaders. Because he changes the seasons and he changes leaders. That's what Daniel just said right here. He reveals the deep secret things. Verse 23, I thank thee and praise thee, O God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what is desired of thee, for thou hast made known unto us the king's matter. Okay, so skipping down to verse 26, he goes to the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, Art thou able to make known to me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Here's another thing you've got to understand. We're going to continue with this verse. Here's another thing you've got to understand. Sometimes can be different, can be contrary to a lot of the things we were told growing up. But the God we serve is not a God full of secrets who's got stuff he's trying to keep from you and see if you'll slip up. And ooh, you don't know when it's coming, and whoops, and it's all this. And a lot of people serve a gotcha God. They serve a God. You don't know when he's coming. You don't know when he's coming. He's waiting for you to slip up, and then he's got you. That's not God. That's not the God that this Bible describes. The God that this Bible describes is a God in heaven who is desiring to make known to you the things he has in store. He desires to make known to you. Look at the writings of Paul. Look what Jesus said. Jesus said, I tell these parables. Why? To reveal a mystery. Because God's got things that people don't know and he wants them to know. So I'm going to tell these things. Then Paul said, God has made known the mystery that has been hidden from the ages unto his people. Why? Because God is not a God in heaven saying, I've got a bunch of secrets and they can't know. He's a God in heaven saying, I've got a plan, and if my people will tune into my spirit and see what this word is saying and see what prophecy is telling them and see what the Spirit is speaking to them, I'm going to let them know what's happening. Why? Daniel said it, because there's a God in heaven. Daniel went before Nebuchadnezzar and said, you have soothsayers, you have magicians, you have probably tarot card readers, you have gypsies, whatever you have, and they can't tell you anything. But Daniel said, but let me show you, there's a God in heaven. Because what I'm about to tell you, and he's the dream and the visions of the head upon thy bed are these. Verse 29. As for thee, O king, my thoughts came into thy thoughts came into my mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter, and he that revealeth secrets made known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes, that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and thou mightest know the thoughts of the heart. So he's telling a lot of things here. Verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest and beheld a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. Okay? The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no peace was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. So these guys couldn't tell him his dream. Think of how shocked Nebuchadnezzar was when Daniel stood there and told him everything he just dreamed about. I mean, seriously, he said, look, I'm going to show you there's a God in heaven. Let me tell you what you dreamed last night. And he told him the whole thing. Told him every detail. Listen, I wake up 5 minutes later and I can't remember the details of my dream. Daniel told him everything. Said there's a God in heaven. So now he's going to interpret. We're going to do this quickly. Verse 37, Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. That's very interesting. Remember, God has a time and a season for everything. There was a purpose for the kingdom of Babylon. There was a purpose for Nebuchadnezzar. As terrible and sinful and heathen of a king he was, and as terrible as that nation was upon the nation of Israel, or upon the nation of Judah, there was a season, there was a purpose for it. Verse 38, And whatsoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the fowls of the heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So, I want you to understand, the vision that he had was a vision of a man. Okay? But this was not a natural fleshly man. It was a man made of 4 different parts. His head was gold. He just told Nebuchadnezzar, he said, you are that head of gold. Babylon is the kingdom that is the head of gold. Okay? Then he's going to go down. He's going to say you've got arms and a chest of silver. Okay? And that silver, and he's going to go on to say, well, let's just read it. After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall rule over all the earth, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh into pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another. Even as iron is not mixed with clay, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. It shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest the stone was cut out of the mountains without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. Okay? So he gave the dream, he gave the interpretation of the dream. He said, here's how it's going to be. What Nebuchadnezzar saw and what Daniel interpreted was from the time of Nebuchadnezzar until the time of the coming of the kingdom of heaven on this planet. Nebuchadnezzar saw all that happen in the form of a man and all the things that are interpreted of that. So the question is, what are things going to be like in the last days? To know what things are going to be like in the last days, we can look at that story and a few other from the book of Daniel, one from the book, a few from the book of Ezekiel. Obviously, you can look in Revelation. However, I will say this, and this is me being somebody, I've taught a lot on Revelation. If you want to know about end-time prophecy, and if you want to know what's going to happen in the end times, Revelation talks about the end times. But Revelation does not talk much about the earthly dealings of end times. And I understand we got, in Revelation, you've got all the kings, you got the great harlot, you got the beast, you got the false prophet, you got all this stuff, but you got to understand much of Revelation is speaking on a spiritual level, and really the book of Revelation is the story of the nation of Israel finally coming to know the Messiah. That's what Revelation is about. If you want to know about earthly happenings and earthly events, of earthly kingdoms and what's going to happen in the end times, you will find much more of that in the Old Testament. You will find much more prophecy in the Old Testament. The book of Zechariah, which is only a few chapters long, contains more end-time prophecy than the entire book of Revelation. Daniel speaks in more detail about what's going to happen in the last days than the entire book of Revelation speaks of. Okay? So people will notice I turn to the Old Testament quite a bit when I talk about end-time prophecy. That's why. Another thing you got to understand is that the Bible says that God is a God of pattern. What God did, and the Bible says in the book of Ecclesiastes, it says in the book of Proverbs, it says that which has been done is that which shall be, that which is that which, that which was is now that which is. He's talking about cycles. He says there's no new thing under the sun. What that simply means is what God has done is what God is going to do. So he works in cycles. What he's done before, he's going to do again. And you can see that in the Bible. You can see it in the Bible. You can see the things that have happened in Scripture, and then look throughout history, and you'll see that God has been in a cycle of time. Okay? And so that's what he's doing. So in the last days, God is going to be wrapping up his final cycle. I'm going to be throwing a few things out there, and I want people to understand it is not meant to be a prediction. It's not by any means meant to be anything like that. It's just some very interesting things that we need to consider. Okay? But God's pattern has always been, if you want to put it into numbers, God's pattern has always been the number 7. It's always been, because that's how you go 7 days in the week, and then you start over again. Now it's a whole other pattern. Okay? And on the 7th day is always a Sabbath. When you get to the 7th year, you have a sabbatical year, and then you start the count all over. It always goes that way. Okay? After you have 7 cycles of 7, after you have 49 years, you take the 50th year, and it's a year of Jubilee. You take that, and that year you take off for an entire year. All debts canceled, everything, every ownership of everything goes back to the owner. All debts are canceled. How awesome would that be? Isn't that something? And we think, oh, wouldn't that be great? Don't you understand? That's what God designed. God designed that people will never be in an endless cycle of debt. So he said, look, you're going to have this, but debt is going to be canceled. It's not going to last forever. Even God said that. Okay? So, so we got this. There have been, since the time of Joshua conquering the land of Canaan, there have been Jubilee cycles going all the way until today. We are currently in a Jubilee year on the Jewish calendar, right now. And from the time of Joshua to right now, there have been 70 Jubilees. This is the 70th Jubilee since the time of Joshua. Okay? That year ends, That Jewish year ends toward the end of August, and it goes to the next year. Going to the next year immediately takes you to the city's Jubilee, because that year is now 50 years since the time that Jerusalem became a nation, became the city. They regained Jerusalem as the capital city. I'm just throwing these things out there. They're just things to consider. Just these things, and that's a lot of numbers, that's a lot of coincidence. It very well may be, but you've got to understand God keeps track of his cycles, and God keeps track of his patterns. He always has. So when I know that these things are happening, and I'm watching and I'm seeing what's happening in the world, I understand that at any given moment, God is up to something. And the Bible describes what the world is going to be like. And so when I begin to see that the world is starting to look like what God described it's going to be, and I'm going to get into this here in a minute, give the details. When I start seeing that these things are beginning to line up from Daniel, from Ezekiel, from Zechariah, from Revelation, from Matthew 24, which, by the way, one chapter in Matthew contains more end-time prophecy than the entire book of Revelation. Okay? When all of these things start to line up, as all of this other stuff is happening that is falling right into place, I understand I need to be fully prepared for the last days. So what's the world going to be like? Well, this tells me that it's going to begin with kingdoms. It's all about kingdoms. He says to Nebuchadnezzar, there's a kingdom that starts this whole thing off. From the time of Nebuchadnezzar to the end times, there's a kingdom that starts it off. It's Babylon. Okay? And I'm not going to get into any of this. It talks about 7 kingdoms, and 5 have been, 6 is now, and 1 is yet to come. That's a whole other thing, a whole other can of worms I don't have time to get into. But from Nebuchadnezzar, he is fourth from the last. Okay, so he's kingdom, and there's 3 left from him, because prior to him you have Egypt and Assyria. Okay, so he is right there. He is the head of gold, and he said it. And basically, God said it's all downhill from here. He said you're the top. You're the biggest, greatest nation from this time on. From there on, Babylon is going to fall, and Babylon did fall. It fell to the Persians. And that was God's plan too, because that was under Cyrus. Cyrus was prophesied in the Bible 100 years before Nebuchadnezzar. So God is up to something. With the Persians, then come the Greeks. That is the brass, okay? And as a matter of fact, the Greeks brought in the Bronze Age, okay? So the belly and the thighs of brass, that's Greece. From then on, he says, we've got iron and clay. These are the legs. And he said, that is the kingdom. Now, the funny thing about the image of a man, okay, the legs, we're going to talk about legs here in a second. It's going to last a while, okay? Because, especially not for all of us, but for some of us, we're up there a little bit. So our legs go on a little bit. Now some people's legs, they're not as long as mine, so I'm just going to quit talking about that. But I get with some short people jokes, and if you can't take it, don't worry about it. Short people are like, yeah, but I bet you never, I don't have to duck when I go under. Yeah, I know that. I hit my head on everything all the time. So as legs go, there are some attributes we got to understand, because this is the last kingdom in his vision that he's talking about. They are mixed with iron and clay. Okay, it's very important. You got to understand that the last kingdom is going to be a kingdom of mixture. The last kingdom is going to be putting things together. This is mixture. Okay, so you have iron. You have clay. Both iron and clay come from the earth. Okay? Clay is simply dirt. Dirt over time. Iron is an element that comes out of the ground. It's mined. It's an ore. But it all comes out of the ground. That's important. We're going to get to that here in a second. So the last kingdom is described as these legs. There is, with every person, or with this vision, there is a left leg, there is a right leg. So this is the first of all the kingdoms that have come before where there is going to be 2 halves. There's going to be division. So in the last days, the kingdom that we will see in the last days will be a kingdom that is divided. Because there's a left leg, there's a right leg. Okay? Going even further down the legs, when you get to the very end, what do you get to? You get to the toes. And now what was left and right, 2 divisions, become 10. Okay? In the last days, there will be a division of kingdoms. Now, here is where we have to wrap our mind around something which may be a little different than some preconceived notions that people have had. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag right away. That might hurt a little bit. Okay? How many people have heard that in the last days there will be a one world global government? Right? They preached that to me all my life. That is not what the Bible says. It's what preachers said. It's what a lot of really good books said. But it is not going to be a one world global government. It is going to be a kingdom that is ruled by a beast. But is this a global kingdom? It is not. There will be nations. According to Ezekiel 38 and 39, according to some other places, according to some things that Revelation alludes to, look, I understand. I understand a lot of things we've been taught and some things, and everybody told me there's going to be one world currency. You can't find that in the Bible either. And we're talking about the mark. I understand. You know, we got the mark. You can't buy or sell without the mark, and that's probably what they're talking about. But you got to understand, the Bible doesn't say all of these things that we've preached for all these years. But there will be a kingdom. There will be a kingdom, and it is going to be, the best way I can describe it is you've got to understand what these legs were in Nebuchadnezzar's vision. What kingdom was the legs? It was the kingdom of Rome. Well, here's the deal. The Roman Empire is supposed to be there all the way till those 10 toes, and all the way until Jesus Christ the Rock destroys all the kingdoms and becomes King of Kings over all things. Rome is still going to be there. That final kingdom, which is the kingdom of Rome, is still here, according to prophecy, because it's not going anywhere. There's no pause, okay? It's going to continue all the way till the end. So what is this kingdom that we're talking about? It is the Roman Empire. We're talking about geography. What is this last empire, the beast's kingdom, going to look like? It's going to be what people call the revised Roman Empire. We need to understand what the Roman Empire was in the time of Daniel, or not in the time of Daniel, but in the time of the height of the Roman Empire, which would be the time of Christ, okay, and 100 or so years after that. What was the Roman Empire? The Roman Empire was all of the Middle Eastern countries, all of the South Asian countries, all of the Northern African countries, many of the Southern and Southeastern European countries. These were all the Roman Empire. He says that's not going to change. It is that kingdom that is going to be the kingdom that divides into 10 toes and is destroyed by the kingdom of Jesus Christ, kingdom of heaven. That's the kingdom. So that's the kingdom that will be ruled by the Antichrist. That's the kingdom that will be the seventh kingdom, the kingdom of the time of the tribulation in Revelation. That kingdom right there. Now, geography has changed. You know, we've changed borders and we've changed names of countries, but God has kept track of what that kingdom is. And to this day, that is still exactly what he's talking about. What's very interesting is what is dead center in the old Roman Empire, and still to this day, what is going to be the revised Roman Empire, what is dead bullseye center of that kingdom? It is Jerusalem and it is Israel. Okay? It is right in the middle. I want to read you something. You don't have to turn there. I'm going to go there real quick. I'm going to read you something from the book of Ezekiel. This is really interesting. I was not going to throw this in, but last night, of all things, on an airplane from O'Hare to Dayton, I read this right here. Very, very cool. Ezekiel 36. If you want to write this down. Ezekiel 36. It says, where do I want to start here? Verse 24, for I will take you from among the heathen and gather you out of all countries. I will bring you into your own land. Then I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean. From all your filthiness, from all your idols, I will cleanse you. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you an heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you, and I will cause you to walk on my statutes. You shall keep my judgments and do them. And it goes on. You can read that. Read the 36th chapter of the book of Ezekiel when you go home tonight. Read it this week. It's very, very cool. It's God talking about the fact that no matter what happens around you, and no matter what kingdoms rise and fall around you, I have you in my hand. I will keep you clean no matter what happens, no matter what you go through, no matter what you have done. And God mentions in this chapter, he says, it is because of my glory, not because of your righteousness, but because of my glory. That land glorifies me, God says. So no matter what happens, I'll take you. I'll kick every enemy out. I'll cleanse you. I'll purify you. I'll give you a new heart, whatever I have to do. That land and my people will glorify me. That's what God said. Okay? So in the last days, we're going to have this kingdom, and Israel is going to be dead center. Okay? Now, I just spent 2.5, almost 3 days with this thing called, Christians United for Israel. And a lot of people speak, and a lot of cool information come out. But you've got to understand, there is a global effort right now, to divide that land. Because they're trying to fulfill, and not directly trying to fulfill, but it's trying to work out. That land wants to be divided. What is so important about this land? What is so important about this land, this area? It is the center point of all division of the earth. Because from that point, which would be southern Turkey, right where Syria and Iran and everything is. Wish I had a map, should have planned ahead. But that is a dividing point. It is the dividing point in the world, from north and south, from east and west. It is a dividing point of religion. It is a dividing point of ethnicity. It's a dividing point of continents. Okay, right there, from that position on planet Earth can equidistantly reach every single thing around it. It's because it's God's land, because that's where God wants to sit. Okay, but at the same time, in the book of Revelation, it says that in a place called Pergamos, which is actually in Turkey, and I'm not totally saying this literally, but I'm also not totally saying it literally. It says in this place called Pergamos, it says where Satan has placed his throne. See, Satan also wants to be in this area too. He also wants to be able to equidistantly reach the entire earth. So that's why the kingdom is going to be there. People say, why isn't America mentioned in the last days? Listen, this whole Bible, it's not about America, it's about Israel. Okay? My personal belief is that America, the United States, though we only be, 240 years old, our recent, very young history is very spiritually connected to the nation of Israel. And I believe God has always had buffer nations. Since the beginning of time of his kingdom, he has always had buffer nations that he has used, and he has needed to be a friend and a help to Israel. When Israel was not going to survive a famine, he used Egypt to protect them and to provide for them. When Israel needed liberated from its enemies, he used a nation called Persia. Okay, when all this was coming about, God used nations to be a help to Israel. And in the last 240 years, I believe God has said in the western part of the world, Israel needs a friend. I fully believe that that's why God ordained and established this nation that we live in today. Because we are to be a light of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. And we are to be a buffer nation. We are to be a help and a friend to God's people and the nation of Israel. So in the last days, what are we going to see? We're going to see division. And we're going to see division that mixes very, very well. Because you take clay and you take iron. Though you have two legs and they're mixed together. Once you mix clay and iron together, they fit together like a glove. They're mixed together. You try and take that stuff apart, try and get the iron out of the clay, all that stuff. They're in there. They're mixed together. What the nation or what the kingdom in the last days is going to look like, it is going to be things you never thought could mix together, but they fit together so perfectly and you can't pull them back apart. That's what the last days are going to look like on this globe and on this kingdom. It is going to be a mixture of things we never thought could mix together ever, but now they fit together perfectly. Okay? There are things religions that should not fit together, and yet the craftiness of people and the craftiness of new doctrines and new ideas is able to make two different religions, whether it be Christian and Islam, whether it be Judaism and Islam, whether it be any other ideologies that should not be able to go together. And people to this day are beginning to be convinced, well, they're just two different halves. They should be able to just fit together like a glove. We have religious leadership in the globe, in the world right now that publicly declares, Christian leadership that publicly declares that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the Bible is also the same God as the Quran. And listen to me, I don't care how liberal or left-wing, this is not political. I know people that are more Republican than you can ever think of, and more right-wing, that still believe garbage like this. It doesn't matter. I don't care how far of an extreme you go to. You cannot show me scripturally, and in fact, I can prove you 6 ways to Sunday in Scripture. I will take this Bible and show it to you 50 different ways. The God of the Old Testament is not the God that is preached of in the Quran and in Islam, because they go separate from each other. I can show you where stories differ. I can show you where things are not the same. I don't have to convince anybody of this in this room. One literature says that Jesus is the Son of God. One literature says that God has no son. How can these be the same God? How can somebody convince the known world that these fit together? But Nebuchadnezzar saw a vision and said, in the last days, the last kingdom will mix together perfectly. And there'll be a mixture. There'll be one side and there'll be another side. That's why I fully and completely believe that in the last days, religious leadership in the last days will be the least conservative we have ever seen. We will hear things out of the mouth of religious leaders that we never thought we'd hear. We will hear religious leadership begin to declare that they're going to accept things that they've never accepted before. Why? Because this last kingdom represents division. Then what's going to happen? Kingdoms are going to start to become reorganized. We're going to start to see things shift and start to see things change. And according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, it is going to be a shift and a change away from Judeo-Christian and away from the nation of Israel. How is this going to happen? I'm going to do my best. I know a lot of people have seen my video, but I'm going to describe to you exactly what has happened in the last month and a half that has accelerated what Ezekiel's prophesying more so than we have ever seen. You've got to understand how Europe works. Okay? Europe represents the Western world, even though it is east of us. That is the Western world. Okay? That is Western civilization. We are an extension of that civilization. Okay, we came out of that, but we're still tied into that Western civilization. And as it works, economy. Let me see. Let me do my best. People go to school for years. They get doctorate degrees on economy to tell you what I'm about to tell you. Here's how economy works. If you have no money, you're toast. Okay? I just gave you a doctorate degree in economy. If you have no money, you can't buy. Okay? All right? So they need money. As it is, in an economy, when money is worthless or when money is not there, you need somebody to give you money. Okay? That's why people say, oh, no, you can buy stuff without money. No, you can't. Well, I got a credit card. Somebody's paying for it. Okay? No, you need money. It might not be yours, but somebody's paying for it. So when you have nations that no longer have value of their money, yet they still need to run their government, they still need to pay for what they import, they still need to do all these things, they need money. So they turn to people. As it happens, there are organizations in Europe. One of them is known as the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Okay, that is not a bank full of money. That is not some bank account somewhere where they'll say, I'm going to give you this money. That is a group of people who have a lot of good connections. That's a group of people with really rich friends. That's what the IMF is. And the IMF says to Greece, they say to Spain, they say to Portugal, you're broke, you need money. I've got friends over here that have got it. Let me put you two together and we'll work out a deal. That's what it is. Here's the problem. They've run out of rich friends. Because rich friends have given their money to Greece and to Spain, and they lost that money too. So they've run out of, their coffers are empty. So you have countries that need to pay the bills and no money. So about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and I'm sure I'm way off on this, I apologize, but it's somewhere along those lines, they got together and they decided, you know what, we as individual countries, we're having trouble. What if we got together? What if we came together, became a union? And part of that did become the European Union and all that stuff, and as that is now collectively, they're helping each other. But as anyone can know, even in a small group or a society, it still happens on a larger scale. When you have a few people paying all the bills, guess what everybody else does? Oh, this is great. This is wonderful. I don't have to, And so what you're left with is 3, maybe 4 countries paying everybody's bills. And last month, the United Kingdom said, we're done. We're done paying everybody's bills. We're done doing this. We're out. Okay? The United Kingdom was paying somewhere between 35, possibly even close to 40% of the debt of the European Union, and suddenly they're gone. Think of the trouble they're in over the next 6 months. So you've got countries scratching their head. Just wait till France leaves, which I believe is next. Then they're in big trouble. Okay? They're scratching their heads. All of our rich friends are broke. We have nobody left. We can't even put our money together collectively and pay the bills. Who can pay the bills? Who's got money? The only countries that have money left in that part of the world are the oil countries. That's it. Nobody has money to lend. Nobody has it. But oil countries have money coming out of their ears. Why? Because you and I have been buying their product for so long. Just how it is. Okay? That's why I love it when people say, "Oh, these people, they don't like, they don't like homosexuals. I'm going to boycott that organization." Really? Did you put gas in your car this morning? Because Saudi Arabia hangs homosexuals. So won't you boycott the gas too? Bet you won't do that. Yeah. Sorry, got a little ugly there for a second. Okay, so who's got money? Oil countries. As sure as I'm standing here today, what are we going to see in the last days? As sure as I'm standing here today, I believe it with all my heart. The money that the oil countries has is going to be too big of a temptation for many, many nations. We want to be friends with them. Let me tell you something that happened in 1990, 1991. Okay? For those of you who weren't around back then. We had this little thing called the Gulf War. Okay? No, not that Gulf War. There was one before that. Okay? Very quick, very easy, in and out. We did good. Okay? But there was a fellow by the name of Saddam Hussein who invaded Kuwait. And we, as a nation, said, we're going to go over there and help out, but we need a base of operations. We need a place to put all of our structure and logistics. Well, Saudi Arabia, they'll help us out. So we went over there. Saudi Arabia was our base of operations. Saddam Hussein did the most genius thing any military leader could have done. He saw us sitting at Saudi Arabia. He said, guys, I've got a plan. Turn your rockets around. Hit Tel Aviv. They started bombing Tel Aviv out of nowhere. Bombs start going. You guys remember reporters with gas masks on? They weren't in Kuwait. They were in Israel. Scud missiles. You remember all that? You remember all this stuff? They were hitting Tel Aviv. Why? Because Saddam Hussein knew something. He said, they're in Saudi Arabia. They're in an Islamic country. I'm going to draw a line in the sand. I'm going to start attacking Israel. And I know what Saudi Arabia is going to do. Saudi Arabia is going to look at America and say, pick a side. Are you with us or with them? That's exactly what they did. They said, pick a side. Thank God we had a backbone in the White House. Missed that for quite a while, just so you know. We had a backbone in the White House that called their bluff and helped Israel. Because those nations are interested. What is your alliance with Israel going to be? You want our help? What's your alliance with Israel? Because those countries fully believe that the devil is Israel. Israel is the devil. You know who the great devil is? You know who Iran calls the great devil? That'd be you and me. Iran. You know those people we just gave $180 billion to? They call us the great devil. Okay? A year ago, and that brings me to my next point. A year ago, we have a country like Iran that wants to see Israel underwater, who we made an agreement with. You understand that these are the things that you can expect to see in the last days. You can expect to see division, and you can expect to see everybody all around Israel having every reason in the world to turn against them. Why? Because economy being what it is, these people need to turn to the oil countries. They need their money. So the oil countries, who are Islamic countries, say, you want to be with us? You got to turn your back on that little country right there called Israel. I believe that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay? With that will be a restructuring. Where are we at? Oh, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Got a few more minutes. With that will be a restructuring. Why? Because those legs didn't stay just 2 solid legs. They became 10 toes. The Bible says that the final kingdom in the book of Revelation is symbolized by a beast with 7 heads and 10 crowns. What does that mean? There will be a division of 10 kingdoms. These will be split. This nation, no longer will it be what it is now. See, when people realized there was going to be 10 nations in the last days, boy, as soon as the European Union got 10 countries, everybody said, there it is, there it is. There's the beast. Well, then it got an 11th country, and it messed everybody's doctrine up. You know, so that's not it. That's not what it is. Okay? Then you got the United Nations. Don't get me started. You know, how many countries are going to be in the United Nations in the last days? How many are there now? There's a lot. How many nations are going to be in the United Kingdom, in the United Nations in the last days? Do you know, Jeremy? I'll just throw it out there. It's going to be 153 nations. Moving on. Okay, that's a whole other thing. The Bible does say that, though. So there's going to be some nations drop off. But there's going to be 10 kingdoms, but 7 crowns. 7 kingdoms. What did I say? 7 crowns?
But it's 7 kingdoms, 10 crowns.
7 kingdoms, 10 crowns. Do you know why? Thank you. This just had me messed up. Do you know why that is? It's in the book of Daniel. Because these 10 kingdoms will be organized at a time that they are unified by a leader. Yeah. When they are unified by a leader. And 3 of those kingdoms will immediately give their thrones to that leader. There'll still be 10 kingdoms, but only 7 leaders. See what I'm saying? Okay, because 3 of those kingdoms gave their nations to that one unified leader, who is the beast. So that's going to happen. But this has gone a whole different direction. You guys egg me on sometimes. That's not what we're getting into. Okay. So what is happening? Where do we fit into this? I love to blame you guys. It helps me out. But you keep me on my toes anyway. So, because I'm doing all this on the fly, I don't have a letter of notes up here. Okay, so I apologize for messing up my one little line there. So what do we have? We have an area that God geographically has had his hand upon since the time of Abraham, and that nation is going to be turned upon. Ezekiel 38 and 39, there will be a war fought there. It will be a war fought upon Israel on every side. That war will end with Israel still standing, and it will end with a peace treaty. That peace treaty, I believe, is the treaty that starts a 7-year period. Okay? Israel could be attacked at any moment. Israel is the greatest enemy of so many nations that surround it. It's ridiculous. Have you seen on the news all the stabbings that happened? Israeli citizens getting stabbed by Palestinians. Anybody hear about the 13-year-old girl that got stabbed in her bed? You guys hear that? That's just one of many stories. Do you know why they're doing that? I just found this out the other day. Why are Palestinians breaking into some random 13-year-old girl's house and stabbing her in the middle of the night? Why are they stabbing people in restaurants? Why are they stabbing Israelis? Why are they killing them? Why? Because the Palestinian Authority, which is governmental leadership over a nation that doesn't even exist, okay, are paying money to the families of terrorists who kill Israelis. Do you know who gives $178 billion to the Palestinian Authority every year? The United States of America. Because they're our friends. Because there are two legs. They are mixed. You can't pay one leg without paying the other leg. Because that's how the nations are going to look in the last days. We've got to be equal. Because we got two legs, we got to be equal. We can't be unfair with one. So we give the Palestinian Authority $178 billion a year while they pay that money to terrorists who kill Israelis. Now, we did pull our heads out of the sand a little bit, and congressmen have said we will not pay, our support that goes to the Palestinian Authority will be deducted by the amount they are paying to terrorists. Wow, great. So the Palestinian Authority simply turned to their little political organization, which is the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they just simply funnel the money through them to avoid that loophole. Okay? Go to call your congressman and find out. Call him, ask him, have him explain it to you. Call Sherrod Brown's office tomorrow and ask him that question. Okay? I'm serious. I'm dead serious with you. Call them tomorrow and find out. They'll love it because they're all in Cleveland. They're all too busy to take a call, but you call them every 5 minutes. I don't care. Do it, okay? But, so, be that as it may, God says, but I am in charge of raising up leaders. I'm in charge. God says, I will raise up leaders. Okay? Will you shut off the feed now?